How you doing there? We're going to continue working on problem-solving strategies by interpreting tables, charts, and graphs. Right here we have a pictograph, and a pictograph uses pictures to represent numbers and figures. So right here we have a pictograph using the teachers selling records, okay? And it says that each record means that it was 30,000 sold. So I'm going to go down here to some information that's given right here for us to solve on our problem. It says create a table that represents the data from the pictograph. So first and foremost, I'm going to have to do some interpreting of this pictograph. And then it says how many more records did the top two teachers sell than the bottom two teachers sell? Now I have to make sure I understand what this is exactly asking. It's not asking for the top two teachers in alignment here, but the top two teachers in the form of sales, as in the top two teachers who sold the most compared to the bottom two teachers who sold the least. Okay? So let's go through here and interpret our data that we have here. Now, first and foremost, we know that one whole record is equal to 30,000 records being sold. So, with that being said, I can also interpret that a half a record would equal 15,000 records being sold. Okay? So let's go up here to Miss Holland right here. Okay? Now, there's plenty of ways that you can do this. The way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to count by 30 for each record and then add my 3 extra zeros to the end of my number. So I have 30, 60, 90, 120, 150,000 records that were sold by Mrs. Holland.
And I could have also just said 5 times 30,000, correct?
Yes, ma'am, you could have also did that. Now, when we get down here to Miss Roberts, we have this one right here. She has 3.5 records sold. So right here, if I count by my 30s also, I know it's 30, 60, 90, but I can't count 30 again because I only have a half record here. So I have 90 plus 15, which gives me 105,000 records sold. Now down here we get here to Mr. Valentine, and we're going to see how many records he sold. So I have 30, 60, 90, 120, 115, 180, and then I have a half record right here. So I have to do 180 plus 15, which is 195,000 records sold. Down here to Mr. Ball we have 30, 60, your half record, so you have to do 60 plus 15. So 60 plus 15 gives me 75,000 records sold. And then lastly, Miss Norman, we have 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210,000 records sold. Now, if you paid close attention, you would notice that I was simply counting my multiples of 3 and then adding the zeros where they were necessary in order to make the figures for what the record stood for. So now I can go down here to my problem and answer my question. So it says, how many records did the top two teachers sell than the bottom two teachers? So right here I see that it's comparing the top two teachers and the bottom two teachers. So I have to realize who are my top two teachers that sold. So looking at my data here, I see that Mr. Valentine and Miss Norman were my top two teachers. And also, I'm going to change the color here. Looking at my data, I also see that my bottom two were Mrs. Roberts, and they'll be in blue, and Mr. Ball were my bottom two teachers. So first and foremost, I have to combine my figures for Mr. Valentine and Miss Norman to find out what they sold all together. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit on the page so that way we have a little bit extra room. So I remember Mr. Valentine had a total of 195,000 sold, and Miss Norman had a total of 210,000 records sold.
So what are you going to do with those two numbers?
Well, I'm going to add these two numbers up because I'm comparing my top two sales to my bottom two sales. So I'm going to add these two numbers up. So I have a 0, 0 plus 0 is 0. Again, 0 plus 0 is 0. Very quick process there. Then I have 5 plus 0 equals 5. And then 9 plus 1 equals 10, so I have to carry my 1 here. So 1 plus 1 equals 2, and 2 plus 2 equals 4. So Mr. Valentine and Ms. Norman sold a total of 405,000 records. And so I'm going to be comparing that number to the sales of Mr. Ball and Ms. Roberts. Now Ms. Roberts sold a total of 105,000 records, and Mr. Ball sold a total of 75,000 records. So I also, in this process, have to add up both of these. So I go through my adding process. 0 plus 0 is 0. 0 and 0 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0 again. Got my comma. 5 plus 5 equals 10. I carry my 1 over. 1 plus 0 is 0. 1 plus 7 is 8. And then 1, there's nothing here, so I bring down my 1. So they sold a total of 180,000 records. So here is where I'm going to compare my two numbers. So if I'm comparing, I'm finding the difference between how many Mr. Valentine and Ms. Norman sold and what Mr. Ball and Ms. Roberts sold.
Okay, you said difference.
Yes, ma'am.
So how did you know to subtract Mr. Valentine and Ms. Norman's score and take Mr. Ball's score and Ms. Roberts' score?
Yes. Well, right here I have one of the key words here in my problem. It says, how many more records did the top two teachers sell? And this is a comparison word, than, if I can underline it, the bottom two teachers. So right here, it gives me a lot of information on what operations I am going to use within my problem. This here tells me I'm comparing right here and right here also. When I see the top two leaders compared to the bottom two, I know that I have to combine, which means add. So I'm using that addition operation here. Comparing it to the bottom two, which is that addition operation here, combining them. And then finding the difference between those, which means subtraction. And that's the other operation that we have to use in this problem. So I have my two totals, my 405,000 for Mr. Valentine and Ms. Norman, and my 180,000 for Mr. Ball and Ms. Roberts. So one more time, I'm going to clear to give myself some space. So Mr. Valentine and Ms. Norman had a total of 405,000 records sold. And Mr. Ball and Mrs. Roberts had a total of 180,000 records sold. So I go through my subtraction process here. 0 minus 0 equals 0. 0 minus 0 equals 0. 0 minus 0, one more time, equals 0. Ooh, I love problems like that. So here we go. 5 minus 0 equals 5. Uh-oh, now I get to a doozy right here. I have 0 minus 8. Well, I can't take 8 away from 0, so I have to go over here to my 100,000s place and borrow from that. This is going to reduce that number to 3. This makes 10. So now I have 10 minus 8, which equals 2. And then 3 minus 1, that equals 2. So the difference between the top two sellers and the bottom two sellers is 225,000. And never forget to label your answer. Records. And there we have it.